exciting and a privilege to get to come and talk to you today about the work that we're doing, because we're quite excited about it, really. So in November 2013, it was announced that the next holder of the UK City of Culture title would be Hull in 2017. City of Culture is a UK-wide scheme that takes a similar shape to the already existing Capital of Culture scheme that you might have been familiar with from its transformations of Glasgow in 1990 and Liverpool in 2008. It's administered by the Department for Digital Media, Culture and Sport, and it guarantees investment for a city to take the mantle of City of Culture and act as a beacon for UK arts, drama, music and performance for a full year. Not long after that announcement in 2013, the first rumblings in the university archives began. Just how are we going to capture this year for the historical record? So in this session, I'm going to start by talking a bit about the drivers behind creating this digital archive and the shape that the collection is taking. Julie's going to demonstrate some of the technological infrastructure that she's been working on. And I'll close by talking a bit about why we've gone down the route that we have. So, it would be fair to say that amongst certain sections of the national press, reaction to the news that Hull would be seen as the UK's face of culture was met with some consternation. Hull was struggling with something of an image problem. Various factors, including severe bomb damage in the Second World War, and perhaps most catastrophically, the collapse of the trawling industry that had been the lifeblood of the city, had led to years and years of economic decline. The decline had naturally impacted all areas of life, from educational attainment to health and well-being outcomes to feelings of local pride or lack thereof. Somewhat unfairly, Hull had the ignominy of being voted the UK's crappiest town in 2003, and it's since topped multiple lists of the worst places to live in Britain in sneering articles, I believe, in the national media. Hull's also got something of a reputation as an end-of-the-line town. It's not somewhere you pass through unless you're looking to leave the country. That might have led to a certain feeling of isolation from the rest of the UK. But it also means that within Hull, there's a really, really strong sense of local identity, a shared heritage, impenetrable slang, a unique accent and demeanour, and an already existing grassroots arts and cultural scene that feels more strongly defined than other major UK cities. So a key part of the bid to become the City of Culture was this passionate belief that culture could be a driver for regeneration of people and of place. The stated vision that I've got on the screen there was the story of a city finding its place in the UK, a city coming out of the shadows and re-establishing its reputation as a gateway that welcomes the world. The story is of Hull, a city that is proud of its people and wants to share its sense of freedom and space with the rest of the UK. So to have that lofty goal and the guarantee of the kind of resources that could potentially help you achieve it is a really rare thing. And we were able to say with quite some certainty that even if the whole thing was a massive disaster, it was going to be noteworthy and something with the potential to shape Hull for the near and far distant future. The desire was strong then, to document this time, to guarantee that decisions made, works created, residents engaged, visitors attracted and money spent were documented and accessible to researchers in the future. We already know there's a huge research interest, even just specifically in the City of Culture as it happened in Hull. Within the university, a couple of years ago, the Culture Place Policy Institute was set up, and their specific research remit is into cities and how they engage with culture and how that helps regenerate them. The University of Hull archives, we've got many other collections already, of course, but mostly paper, but within those collections sit thousands and thousands of digital records. As a university archive service, we've already got a long-standing history of good reputation for research into digital preservation, but we've never previously had the institutional buy-in to get the resources to implement a full-on digital preservation system. That takes time, money, and expertise, and in a climate where similar institutions very few similar institutions are making that leap into instituting digital preservation. It's quite difficult to justify without having something amazing, attention-grabbing, to hang such a request off. So the City of Culture coming to Hull, for us, was just the kind of attention-grabbing event to help us make that giant leap into the unknown. So, in terms of the collection, our main source of records was the Culture Company itself. So the Culture Company was set up in order to deliver the programme of events across 2017. And we were lucky to have a very good relationship with them. I think they were quite excited about the idea of what was going to be quite an ephemeral year, becoming part of a historical record, that their work would be accessible for generations to come. So the main tranche of records that we've got from them, we've taken them from their SharePoint site that they had. And that's somewhere in the region of 80,000 organisational records relating to the operations of the Year of Culture. So every sort of element of work that they did is represented in the digital records that they left behind in their SharePoint site. We've also received a fantastic collection in the region of 20,000 really high quality photographs and videos that were stored in a proprietary system, a digital asset management system called the Asset Bank. So the Culture Company commissioned photographers and videographers to attend every single event and make sure there was a visual record of everything that happened. And luckily for us, they also made sure that anyone who submitted photographs included metadata like keywords and really good titles and things like that. So for us, that's a fantastic collection to make a start with, because so much of the work is already done for us. We've also been given access to the senior leadership team's email mailboxes, and also a swathe of monitoring and evaluation research data, because they were really interested in gathering information on the impact that the cultural year was having. And that was stored in box cloud storage. We've also taken in digital records from major partners of the year, such as the university, the City Council, local organisations that contributed, like local choirs and heritage organisations, and even some artistic contributors. So, for example, there's a theatre company called Slung Low. They staged a year-long play in a residential dock area, and we've got a hard drive that has got alternative endings to the play that nobody knows about, that we just wouldn't have if we hadn't chosen to take in those digital records. And along with the digital records, we do have a small amount of paper records. It's not all digital, and also iconic objects to do with the Year of Culture. So we try to be as representative as possible. So in terms of the journey towards being able to deliver the archive, as I said, discussions within the university started right back in 2013, immediately after the announcement was made. The prior warning meant that it was an easy decision to make to try and archive the City of Culture as it actually happened, rather than waiting till it ended. Right from the beginning, I think the university was really keen to be using open source technology. The university was already using the Samvera repository, and it's something they're very interested in. So I'll talk a bit more about that towards the end and why that decision was made. Funding-wise, the Culture Company contributed towards my role as a digital archivist. The university provided funding towards the technical infrastructure, and we received funding for the National Archives for sector sustainability. So they were keen that we were able to capture our experiences of collecting these records, creating this archive, and then hopefully teach other people and bring other people on the similar journeys. And we also got a smaller pot of funding from the Ferens Educational Trust, who are keen to support the university's involvement with the City of Culture. The university's core funding, it was actually initially scoped to support the hiring of a software developer for 2 years that were going to work alongside us. However, despite having 2 rounds of recruitment, we were unsuccessful in doing that. And I think there's probably a myriad of reasons why that is. But it's something to think about, I guess, in terms of skill shortage, perhaps, and we just potentially weren't able to offer the kind of salary that a private institution might have. That inability to recruit obviously had quite a big impact on the project. There is no digital archive without a software developer, but that led us to tendering process, and looking out for another way to develop the technical infrastructure. And it's led us to a great partnership, I think. So we've been working with CoSector since April of this year, and progress is in motion at the moment in the building of the digital archive. So I'm going to hand over to Julie Allinson from CoSector, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what that means.
So one of the reasons we were chosen for as the successful tenderer, I think, was because we decided to partner with another small consultancy firm called Cottage Labs. And I think together we brought something that it's really hard to recruit, which is lots of experience in this area, both with the technologies that Hull were interested in using and also with the domain. Jointly, the team have probably 50 years of experience in allied solutions and technologies, and it made us, I think, a really kind of a really good fit. I think perhaps most significantly, both Cottage Labs and myself, when I used to work at the University of York, had worked on a JISC-funded project called the Filling the Digital Preservation Gap. And so we already, this work for the Hull City of Culture Archive is kind of a natural extension of that project work that we did. So we'd already been involved in that. So we kind of we were able to hit the ground running in a way that perhaps a new recruit wouldn't have been able to. So in short, our brief was to build a digital archive for Hull City of Culture. And then there was a kind of preferably using Samvera and Archivematica, but you can propose other things. So this diagram here, and there's going to be a lot of diagrams, so hopefully you like diagrams. This is essentially what we proposed in our original tender, which was that staff put the materials into either Box, which is a cloud storage solution, or just in a local file store. This was moved into a transfer location, ingested through Archivematica with the originals and preservation copies going out to the archive information package store, and the dissemination copies going into the dissemination store. Those dissemination files would then be pushed through into a Hyrax repository. Hyrax is a solution that's part of the Samvera suite of tools. And on top of that, there would be a public and staff interface, a combined interface that would allow access to the archive. And then we talked. And I think one of the interesting things about the whole tendering process is it's quite rigid. So when you're putting together your bid, you might think, well, I don't think you should do it that way, and I don't think you should do it this way, but you kind of have to tick all those boxes. So I think the fact that we were able to actually properly get together, we had a couple of quite long sort of workshop type meetings and really talk about what Hull wanted. I think that really benefited us, and we actually kind of refactored what we were doing. So when we sat down together, we looked through, so we explored some of the assumptions that had been made about how things would work, and we also looked about the existing workflows that were in place. And two systems popped out of those discussions. One was that Hull History Centre, which is where the archives sit, already has its own front-end catalogue, and that's based on a technology called Blacklight, which is also part of Hyrax, so it's an open-source discovery tool. And then also archival cataloguing is done in Calm, which is a popular archives cataloguing tool in this country. So if I just go back to this slide. So in this, we don't have Calm, so we're already asking the Archivist to do essentially two duplicate levels of cataloguing to create this public view up here and for the records to go into the Hull History Centre catalogue and Calm. We also haven't really thought very much about the user in here, and I think this is something that often happens in tenders. They tend to focus on what the staff want. So the workshops we did were a useful opportunity to think about how users would come at this. So I'm now going to talk in quite some detail through the actual architecture, and I'm going to try and explain it in a way that doesn't make it sound hideously complicated. So I've come up with this kind of analogy of an iceberg to try and get across certainly one of my motivations, and Anusha, who I work with from Cottage Labs, I think shares this with me, is our job is to create technology that makes the job of the archivist and the end user quite simple. So I think this kind of iceberg metaphor works quite well here. So right up at the top here, we have a member of public who wants to search for archives, wants to look through the archive of the whole City of Culture year. So given that Hull already have a really nice catalogue, it seems sensible that we use that. And we also don't really want them then to have to go somewhere else to get the digital files. So that's the sort of tip of the iceberg. That's all we want them to know about. We don't want them to have to think, well, I think this file's in Hyrax, and I think the digital files are in Archivematica, and I think this and that. We want to keep this simple for them. I think it's important to stress, I don't mean that this necessarily is the only way into the collection. I'm a firm believer in once you've got collections in a good infrastructure, you could do things like online exhibitions and push content out into other services and things like that. But this is the sort of principal route in. And then here's the archivist. This is Laura. Isn't she happy? So Laura has a bunch of files she's just told you about: SharePoint, Box, Asset Bank. And ideally, we want to keep her job quite simple at this point. So we want her to just create a fairly simple spreadsheet listing those things that need to go into the archive. And on the other side, we have Calm, which is already the tool of choice for cataloguing archives. So I guess the question for us as the technical people on the project is, how do we get from the cataloguing Calm, how do we get these files, how do we get all of that to surface in the Hull History Centre catalogue without anyone having to key information in two places or anything like that? So that's really all we want the archivist to have to interact with. But, as Laura mentioned, Hull are already using Samvera, and they expressed an interest in Samvera being part of this technology. Now, Hyrax is a repository solution, and one thing it's very good at is providing access to digital materials. It does a little bit of preservation, but not a sort of full-on digital preservation. So we wanted to have this as part of the architecture. And in the filling the digitization gap, digital preservation gap, sorry. Digitization is not digital preservation, I'm sorry, William. We'd done some work with Archivematica, so Hull were already quite keen to start using Archivematica. They're keen on open source. It's one of the few open source digital preservation solutions. So we want digital files to go into Archivematica, where the preservation copies and the original files go into the Ape Store, and the dissemination copies go into the dissemination store. So this is how we propose to get to that, because at this point, how are things going to talk to each other? So we created this application which we've called the Hull Synchronizer. And the job of the Hull Synchronizer is basically to essentially orchestrate all of these systems talking to each other. So the first thing is, when Laura has created her spreadsheet and has her files, she essentially shares them with this application. We're in the process of working on a couple of utilities that also help Laura. So we've created a script that can run through a set of directories and create her a spreadsheet listing all the files, so she doesn't have to do that herself. And we've got some tools in place that will take the spreadsheet that comes out of Asset Bank and process it into a format that our tool can understand. So all the time we're trying to make the job of the archivist as simple as it can be. So once the Hull Synchronizer gets the files and goes through and checks it's got what it thinks it's got, and it calculates checksums and things, packages all those up, and it sends them to Archivematica, which pushes them out to these two stores. Once the DIP's been created, the Hull Synchronizer recognises that and pushes that through to Hyrax. So now we've got dissemination copies of the files available for public access if that's what the access rights deem, but also we can do controlled access using Hyrax as well, which is a nice feature where there might be some sort of sensitive or time-restricted materials. And then the final piece of this puzzle is we then push into Calm the metadata that we've got, which won't be everything, but one of the things we talked quite a lot about is the kind of archival arrangement that needs to happen. And we felt that expecting Laura to do all that arrangement, or any archivist, in future in a different collection, expecting them to do a full archival arrangement at that beginning piece over on the left there, that would probably just mean files would sit in a file store somewhere for years. So we want to get them into Archivematica, get them preserved as quick as we can, and then we want to leave the actual arrangement part to happen in CALM. So what we're bringing into CALM there is a very simple item level record that's attached to a collection. It doesn't get published into the catalogue until the archivists are ready, until it's been catalogued, and that way we have some control over that, and we can delay the publication until it's ready, but we've got the files in and they're looked after. And then the final piece, Whole History Centre catalogue already uses CALM data to provide its search, and then in addition, what we will be doing is allowing that to then present the files as well. So, coming back to my earlier point, we want the end user to have a very simple experience of going to one interface and not having to go, oh no, there's a file and it's over here, I'll go over to this system. We want it just to be that single point of access with the potential for other points of access if we want them. And we want the job of the archivist to be using systems they're already using and ways of working that they're already using. The archivist can interact directly with hierarchs, and they might want to do that for a certain level of administration. And they can interact with the whole synchronizer, but the only time they would really need to do that would be if something went wrong. And same with Archivematica. And there is some future potential built in here. So Archivematica has a concept of re-ingest. So if in a future time the archive decided that they wanted their preservation masters for images to be JPEG 2000 instead of TIFFs, we could run through and re-ingest all that material. And we've made the architecture open to that, so that's an extra development we could do in future. So just to talk about this from a slightly different angle, I've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to run through this really quickly and then let Laura finish. I just wanted to talk through how things worked from a sort of example, so I'm just going to pop all these up. So if Laura started off with a collection and some folders and some files, this would go through into an ape, go through into a dip. Hierarchs would pull it in. What we add into hierarchs, which I think is the point I wanted to make really here, was we also add an object for the package, and that creates a kind of receipt in hierarchs. So we know the metadata from Archivematica, we know the IDs in Archivematica, we know where the ape's stored, we know we have the METS file that Archivematica created, so we can actually capture a lot of information in hierarchs around the management of those files. And then these are the other two items. And then finally in CALM, we just have the item metadata. And that's linked, the way we can link that together is having a collection ID. And then hierarchs and CALM are linked together via us adding the hierarchs object ID into CALM. And so it's quite simple in its endpoint. Right, so I'm done. Oh, I was just there. Very last quick point. Hierarchs is really about management of those files and providing access to them. The public never go to hierarchs. This is for the staff. The descriptive metadata, the metadata that you want people to actually read, is going to be in CALM, and that's going to end up in the History Centre catalogue.
So I just wanted to finish up by talking just quickly about why we went with this approach, why build up from nothing. Because there are systems available that you can procure that is all done for you, and that's the right approach for some people, but it wasn't the approach that we wanted to take. We were really keen to have that flexibility, to have that customization to suit our collections, which are unique to us, and our workflows that we've developed over time. There's also, within working with open source tools, a great community aspect, something that because people are developing together, there are lots of user groups that people can reach out to, and that really is part of I think the ethos of working in an academic institution is something that our bosses understand, of wanting to go out and develop as well as, using tools, but also developing the tools. And we really wanted to see that scope to extend to the rest of our collections. So the City of Culture is the flagship. It's going to be great, it's going to be shiny, but it's going to be the thing that allows us to open up all of our other digital collections. So it should become in the future business as usual. So I'll just quickly go through next steps, because we're very close to having a system that we can play with. But now the next stage of work starts. So we've got to think about how we do the things that we've always been doing with our paper records: appraisal, so selecting for historical value, cataloguing, making things accessible, and providing access. How do we do that at scale and with media that we've never used before? So that's our next challenges, and we're excited to be forging new frontiers. So I think that's us. Thank you very much.